Zaha Hadid is one of the most interesting architects in the world. She is sometimes called architecture's one and only diva. She's a leading member of the avant-garde of architecture. She won acclaim at age 33 for her design of the Peak Club in Hong Kong. Her most famous work to date is probably the Vitra Firehouse in Germany, but that may change. She's getting lots of attention for her design for the Contemporary Art Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. I am pleased to have her here to talk about what she is doing. There was a time when you were a young architect. You designed the Peak Club, got lots of attention, never built.
Mm. Well, I mean, as an architect, you don't have complete control of your destiny. That was one of the frustrations of this profession. I won the Peak Club literally at the time Margaret Thatcher went to China and that whole thing with Hong Kong kind of vanished. And the whole market collapsed. And so we always see it as kind of we are the reason for these things, but we have no control of political situations. And of course, when I won the Peak, I mean, for a day, they did not know who it was who won it. They never heard of me. Yeah. That was a guy. They called me at Mr. Hadid, and when they discovered it was a woman, there was a bit of kind of fluffing going on. But we don't have a control of that situation. And I think that there still remains a slight cloud which is dissipating over women architects, because I'm not sure why.
It's dissipating now.
Well, I think I think there are more women in a scene. It's not seen as a kind of such a strange thing. They're very good, So
of course they should be. I mean, why?
Oh, absolutely.
Why do you think that it was a male preserve for so long?
I mean, people ask me this all the time. I have no idea. It doesn't make I mean, I'm not saying it's an interesting question because I actually don't have a particular explanation for it. I think it's not just the thing with architecture is that the profession is mostly male, but also the related industries are male-dominated. I mean, whether the contractor's world or the developer's world or whatever it may be, it is, like the trade is mostly men, but I think it will change like anything else,
So what's the challenge here? First of all, you're an artist and you love contemporary art, yes?
Yes.
So this is interesting because you're going to design a building in which there is an engagement between somebody who comes to this public building, the Contemporary Art Center in Cincinnati, and art. And more than that, this is interesting because you want to, the curator, the head director wants to create a building where artists will design, will create art for the building.
For the building, yes.
Which has to do with space.
I mean, what is interesting about this building is it's not a collecting museum. It's a borrowing museum, basically. That means that
they're running exhibitions in and out.
It means that they need tremendous flexibility on one hand, but they also need an identity, as a kind of as a figure. Also, I think that these all these products need a civic aspect, which you say, what does it do for the city? What is the feedback to the city? And therefore, this product was seen as the ground floor, for example, is seen as an extension of civic space in the city. So you can enter the museum, you can sit down, have lunch, whatever, and you don't have to really, you can only pay, if you have to pay, when you go to the back of the building. Also, what we thought about is how, because of these two possibilities of potentials of flexibility and specificity, because of entity and identity, how these could be seen as space which could be pre-designed and sometimes it's almost like a kit of how you can have very small spaces, which may be with a projection, installation, to very vast spaces with a very big show.
But that brings me to another point. You got to go up. This is a vertical building, not a horizontal building,
that's not
right? And also you've got, and tell me about this, which is interesting, we'll see a little bit. Let me see the street scene of this building, Contemporary Art Center. Tell me about the idea of the carpet, the urban carpet, and what you want to do in the lobby.
Well, the idea of the urban carpet was not necessarily physical only, but conceptual, that, you have the street like, as if like coming through the building and moving up, and almost like a kind of continuous surface. And the idea is that, you have public space, which is vertical, which is all the circulation, and also matched with a lobby, which is also... So the idea that the street could be the lighting, could be the paving, but also that this is a civic space is almost open. It could almost be like a square where people can enter, sit there. It's like any time of the day. The difference in this situation where most of the downtown areas most of them are commercial. They're either banks or office buildings or retail. And what is interesting about this is not about any of these things. It's about a cultural event, and an event space. So it is very visible. It's transparent. You can see when you pass by the lobby or you pass by the building that there's nothing happening there, which is maybe an event or people are just sitting having a drink. It's like a plaza, to put it this way, but it's part of a museum. And what's another interesting about the program is that there is one floor which is called the Unmuseum.
The Unmuseum.
The Unmuseum, which is mostly educational, and it means that they can commission artists or art pieces which could be touched. You know, it's mostly for kids, but it could be for grown-ups, where you no longer that idea that art is kind of precious, you can't touch it. So it's educational, it's much more tactile, and there's a connection between this idea of this public space, which is like a playground for children, and the lobby. And what connects them is this kind of this circulation space. And the reason we call it the urban cup is that the idea of urbanism not as an event actually is kind of strung through the building. And the way you move through the building is much more to do with the idea of kind of city landscape, because these spaces cluster together like, aggregates. And it's like seeing a view of a very large city, but implode into the museum.
All right, look at this. This is the exterior of the Contemporary Arts Center. This will be scheduled to build, this is what, December 99 to finish in the fall of 2001, correct? Right?
Great optimism.
We hope so, or we're being optimistic?
No. I think it's going very well. I mean, the town might be optimistic, we'll say, to do it in 1 year.
All right. What am I looking here? This is an isolated exterior, right?
Well, the idea that this is a cluster made of different kind of transparencies.
Right.
For example, there could be solid pieces because it's a museum,
right,
but they could be intercepted by the pinky one. Like this could be the offices.
Right.
So there could be the other kind of interrupted by transparency or solidity. So you could see an exterior which is very solid, but one aspect of it could be transparent because the offices are aggregated inside the galleries. So if you are in the interior, you may see people, within the gallery space. You don't see them because they could be frosted glass or whatever, moving around, which could become almost part of the installation.
Yeah.
But they actually have because of light and air, and you bring in light into the building. And the intention is that these clusters of spaces also have crevices between them, which can bring in light to the outside. So you can have a very good lighting artist to do that, or you could have choreography of lighting on the street. But the idea that first you have to signal that this is not a kind of retail building. This is not a offices. This has events which are cultural, which open to the public. You can just go in and enjoy almost like a kind of interior park, the space.
What is it about museums? I think of Meyer, I think of Gehry, and others, who love to design public institutions and museums. What is it that makes them appealing to an architect?
Well, I think in our modern society, I think it's the one aspect of architecture which is civic, And so, there has not been much research or done work on, like, housing as a kind of a civic event. Maybe that will change, or other institutions. So I think museums are interesting in that sense, and also they're challenging in terms of kind of spatial quality to an architect, because you have to also deal with ideas of light. You have to think about how the person, not only how they place themselves inside the building, but how they place themselves inside the building and to view art. I think it has many challenging aspects to it.
Challenging.
Yeah, I think because of its civic role.
Yeah. Would you rather do horizontal or vertical? Can you make a broad statement that you prefer?
No.
But your experience had been more horizontal than vertical, or not?
Well, because of the size we had at the time, they are mostly kind of more horizontal.
To work with.
And also, I think that in the Peak, for example, I responded to the world of the towers, that you could actually do a horizontal skyscrapers as opposed to vertical ones. They could have the same intensity, given that you have land. And I was also very interesting of the product, what I call of the ground. The ground product was very interesting for me because it would generate a new plan, and also it can generate different kind of organizational system within a ground condition. I don't mind if it's about that there are high rises.
Yeah. Thinking back to where I started this conversation, can you think of any reason your architecture is different because of your gender?
I really don't. I don't think so.
You can't.
Maybe I'm sure that women think differently. Than men. I don't know. But I know men who think more like me than other women. I really cannot say that.
Yeah.
there might be an aspect to it which I think maybe it is, but I can't find it. I can't really say this is like this because I'm a woman. But I am a woman, so it's an outcome of that.
Yes, well, you are, sure. You wanted to be a chanteuse at one time, didn't you? Or did you think about that, or was it just that you had this reputation as a singer?
No, I mean, I never did.
You'd break out in song at a party at the drop of a request.
That was 20 years ago.
You don't do that anymore?
No.
You don't do that anymore?
No, I haven't done that.
And how long?
I never did that.
You never?
No, it was a story. My friend is called Zaha Can Sing.
Yeah, right.
And I used to say, because I used to yell at my students, as a joke, I was singing. I could sing, but I mean, not professionally in any way. And of course, it was an article saying Zaha was a chanteuse.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose.
You suppose what?
There was a moment when, when I was at the AA in my fourth year, I thought I could be anything. I could be a choreographer. I could be. Sort of an astronaut. And that was the great thing about education. If they can give you a window out that you can actually, through your own resources for education, through research, you can do what you want. It's a tremendous thing.
I just want to show this before we go. Take a look at the Center of Contemporary Art in Rome.
The adjacent thing, when you see these pitched roofs, this was also on the site. There's a site which was an existing barracks.
Yeah.
Belonging to the Ministry of Defense, and the ex-Minister of Culture, Walter Veltroni, dealt with it, and there was everything that is given to the Ministry of Culture as an aside for a future contemporary art museum. In Rome, they don't have a contemporary art museum. They have a museum or not, but not a contemporary art museum. And of course, they have a fantastic collection of arte povera, which is art from many Italian artists. And it's really a center as opposed to a museum. In a way, it's like kind of a marriage between the Tate in London and the Getty, like modern art and Getty.
Yeah.
So it has libraries, it has an art heritage center, it has experimental. The intention was to kind of make a field project which it has one reading on one hand, and the second reading you can read individual buildings. So it's much more like streams, and it's layered like an archaeological project. So it's like many layers over each other.
Other than what's happening at MoMA, there's not anything hardly going on here, is it?
Yeah, I find that shocking, actually.
I do, too.
Yeah.
The city of...
I think that, in London also, there's many new projects, but it's all restoration, and there is no... I think that in New York, I always think in New York is it's finite, that the grid is blessed, and it's unpenetrable. And that's how it is. And I think that, they ought to think about what happens to the edges of Manhattan, what happens in the downtown if the work shift changes. Do we really rethink about the skyscraper as an entity? I think it's still valid, but do we think about it? Do we think about how it could connect to kind of public life? And there was an interesting thing about New York, which is that there was an undeclared kind of submission to the city, which says the lobby spaces in New York were brilliant, because they are public spaces. When you on 6th Avenue, when you go from XYZ,
right.
that whole Rockefeller Center development was very much addressed this idea of complex programming matched with incredible kind of fluidity, often in terms of people movement. So one has to kind of really look at these things again. You see, people, I think, what has been lost and what has to be regained is that the theoretical project was ultimately the thing which people wanted to build. And there has been a sort of kind of reluctance to accept the fact that the theoretical project is not about just theory, which was never going to be put into mainstream. The whole intention is that these ideas have to move into the mainstream, because without them, there is no progress, or there is static kind of condition.
Okay. Thank you so much, Zaha Hadid.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.